Everything is an opportunity. Just like the momentum I had walking into that machine shop and feeling so confident. I said, if this doesn't work out, you want to talk about momentum and experience. This is really going to bolster something in my life. This is for something.
Our guest this week is Michale Graves, best known for joining the revival of legendary international punk band The Misfits as their lead singer. Michale has had an incredible career in music, with difficult ebbs and flows of good times and bad. The key to his success? Focus, doing the work, and keeping your eye on the prize. Join us as Michale tells the story of how he set himself up for success, both in the past and the present, on this episode of The Big Break. Michale, thank you for being with us today. It's an honor to have you on the podcast.
I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk with you, Anthony. Thank you very, very much.
Oh, great. So where are you calling from today?
I'm in rural New York State. I'm in a very, very small town in central New York called Preston Hollow. It's a town of about 200, maybe 250 people. I'm 45 minutes south of the capital, Albany, and it's nestled in the Catskill Mountains. If I go to the top of the hill on my property where I live, I can almost see the mountain where Rip Van Winkle fell asleep.
All right. That sounds beautiful.
It is. It's nice. It's finally getting warm here, too.
Yeah, I could totally get it. I mean, I'm sort of a mountain area myself here in Denver, so I totally feel you on that one. How you been handling the current pandemic situation, the stay-at-home orders and things like that? You've been holed up pretty tightly?
Yeah, I've been all right. My life at home really hasn't changed much. You know, my life hasn't changed much other than not being able to go out on tour, which I guess is a big change, like a lot of musicians. That's where I get a bulk of my income from is touring. And so the challenge has been, with all the other challenges, I have children. So now I'm homeschooling a 13-year-old. I'm homeschooling an 11-year-old. I'm homeschooling an 8-year-old, and I have a 2-year-old. And
you got your hands full.
Yeah, and like I said, I live in rural New York State, so I live on a small farm. I have goats, I have chickens and ducks and cats and dogs. So I have lots of chores that keep me busy. And because of not being able to tour, not being able to make that money, I then had to come say, well, how am I gonna replace that income? And so I've been focusing on, through my social sites, using technology to reach my fans, to help drive income by live streaming, by playing live, and just offering products and things that make money from the virtual world, because we can't, right? We're not able to access the physical world right now, so we have to do something different.
Did you have actual tour dates that were canceled? The things that you were planning on doing that got either postponed or completely canceled?
I was a week and a half into a 2-month-long acoustic tour that was going to move in 2 days after, or 3 days after the acoustic tour was to end, which was just a couple of days ago, right? So the acoustic tour was supposed to be March, April into May, a couple of days off for my daughter's birthday, and then I was to be on a plane to go to Europe for another month with the full band that I play with. So yeah.
That's a serious disruption then, for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
And then we had plans for Australia, and we had plans for South America, and to go back to Europe as well. All things that were being planned and booked that were then just gone.
That sucks, man. I'm very sorry to hear that, but it sounds like you're at least making some steps to make up for it. So, we'll get into more of that, I think, in a little bit. I
Yeah.
think I want to take a quick shift here, just a little bit, and let's reverse gears here. Let's go back a little bit. One of the main things we like to do on the show is, talk about how you've gotten to the point where you are today, where you can tour at the extent that you're touring, or you can shift into more of an online model. But just talking just about the early days and how you even got into the music business in general and whatnot. So I'll take it even a step further. One of the things I love to ask folks on this podcast is just how do you got into music in general? And I mean by that is that, a lot of us are, we all like music. A lot of us listen to music. I've listened to music my whole life, but there was never a point where I ever thought that I would actually perform music, let alone create music. So maybe if you could jump in the Wayback Machine a little bit and kind of tell us about the point where you realized maybe that music was something that was more than a thing that you were going to consume, but
Yeah.
that you were going to actively participate in contributing to.
Yeah, it's strange. I look back on my life, and the first dream in my heart was to be a preacher. I wanted to tell people about God. From a very young age till about I don't know, maybe nine or yeah, about 9 or 10 years old. That's what I felt in my heart and in my soul. But then at about 9 or 10, and I had always had music around me. There was always a radio on in my house. Somebody was always listening to music. I just I would hear a song and it would have such a profound effect on my emotions. And I try to explain it. It's so profound that I can it's like how people I think see how we see colors, how we perceive colors. It's very like pictures, and it's very, again, it's a profound emotional experience. And I also had this, which I still do, this maybe it's a compulsion, this drive to reach people and to communicate with them and convey those emotions through song and through music. So I went from the preacher thing and all that comes with that into, wow, music kind of makes me feel like I can maybe get some sort of message about hope and peace and love and all of the things that make up this human experience that I'm trying to figure out. Music was always this place that I could go. And so I found an acoustic guitar in my uncle's closet. I knew he had it, and I knew he didn't play it. So I went and I got it, and it had like 4 strings on it. It was totally out of tune. And I just started making sounds with it. And I would listen to my records, and I would listen to music, and I would just make sounds.
And so where were you? This is are you from is this all in New York area basically, or New Jersey, or where are you?
I grew up
Where were
in
you doing all this?
northeastern New Jersey, in Bergen
Okay.
County, in a town called Dumont, which is about 12 miles from the George Washington Bridge.
Okay.
My mom, my grandparents, they grew up in the Bronx, and before I was born, moved over to Dumont. So it was very suburbia, very suburbia.
So you're in the suburbs of New Jersey. You find this 4 string out of tune acoustic guitar. You start banging around at it a little bit and start learning how to play.
Yeah, my parents always around Christmas time took us to New York City to see all the decorations. And I remember going with them one time, and I never saw homeless people before. I never saw a homeless person before. As we were walking around, we walked past this homeless person, and it was like when Buddha saw the worm, I think. That man, I could still see him in my brain. Just it sparked something inside me. So when we went home, I wrote my first song, and
All right.
it was called Mostly Alone.
Right on. Okay, that's interesting. And what kind of I'm going to ask you what kind of song was it? And I don't really know what I mean by that. I guess was it a mellow song? Was it like give me the idea?
I still remember it was G up to the C. It was like mostly alone, 'cause there's no time to mostly alone. Bam, bam, bam. Yeah, it was just
Okay, so you
simple.
and what was that like? I mean, writing a song like that that's the part that I'm trying to get at. Like, I've never written a song. I wouldn't even know how to write a song. So you actually, and how old are you, by the way, when you wrote this song?
I was probably 9, 10 years old,
No,
maybe.
really.
Yeah,
That's great. That's great.
yeah.
Okay, so you're right. And then, like, when you actually wrote that song? I mean, what did that feel like? I guess. I mean, the creating of a song.
It feels like to me, when you I don't know, like maybe when you capture a butterfly, right? Or if you're trying to chase a frog and you finally chase that frog. And because I think it's the encapsulation of the emotion, the the intangible feelings that we have. And to be able to bring that emotion into the physical realm, right? To manipulate the air so that you can hear it and it does something to you that sort of sense the feeling. When I write a song, even back then, it feels like I capture something which I can then give to you that you wouldn't necessarily be able to give to you if I didn't have the tools, if I didn't have the ability to play a guitar and sing or play a piano and sing.
Okay. Okay. So what happened? I mean, was that like a turning point in some way for you in terms of like you're hooked now, or what happened after that?
I think that after that, my mom especially really saw that I was an artist, that I was dedicated to this because every waking moment I was either using my imagination or listening to music, putting headphones on. I was just all about it. And my mom took a notice to that. And from then on, all the way even and especially through my teenage years, anytime my mother saw an opportunity for me to learn about arts or music, whether it was through my public schools or she saw a class that was offered in the newspaper locally, she pushed me to do it and helped me gain access to those things so that I could learn and continue to, get my mind working around arts and music and learning about art and music as much as I possibly could because I devoured it.
Yeah. Did you like take formal lessons in guitar or anything else, or vocal or anything along those lines?
Not until later. Not until I started doing this professionally. I was in
Okay.
chorus and I was in the weekend theater group type thing.
Okay. And when did you start playing with others in terms of music?
My first band was I was in 6th grade, and this kid came to school. His name was Dave Hogan, and him and I started a band, and with a couple other kids. So it was 6th grade.
What
The
was it
band
called?
we called ourselves Bambi Slam, and then we couldn't call ourselves
Bambi
Bambi.
Slam.
Yeah, we couldn't call ourselves that anymore because it just so happens that there was another band. I don't know. We found this other band that played around called Bambi Slam. So we called ourselves Social Outcast.
All right. And did you guys like play like just play together? Did you? I mean, I think sixth grade. I can't imagine you had like big shows necessarily going on back then. But
No, we just we played at Dave's house. We went to his house. He had this like porch, and we we knew a kid that had some drums. The guy that was living in Dave's basement had some drums. He had, he was an alcoholic, so like he played them now and then, but usually not. So, he let us he let us use his drums, and our friend Scott, his mom got him a bass guitar, and I just had this old Radio Shack microphone that we plugged into the stereo somehow and used that as a PA. And
went at it.
yeah, we tried to cover songs that we liked. We eventually we wrote a couple of songs,
So
as we got older into 7th and 8th grade.
Okay, and so like when did I mean, while you're going through all this, you're obviously at school, it's middle school, you're getting ready to go to high school and whatnot. In your, this is kind of an age where people are kind of starting to think about their future a little and what they're going to do. Were you thinking and planning of being a musician, or was there other plans you had for your life that outside of music that you were thinking of at that time?
I just wanted to be in a band. I just
All right,
knew
so that was
that
it.
I knew that I was going to be a musician. I just knew it. It was just a matter of time. I mean, I was
Okay.
already a musician, but I knew,
But for careers, the difference, just doing it versus making a living on it.
yeah, I always felt like I was heading for something.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, that's actually pretty common. A lot of folks I talk to, it's like it's almost like there wasn't really a choice. It was just sort of, well, yes, this is what I'll clearly be doing. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned, like, much earlier in your life, the idea of being a preacher and whatnot. I mean, for some they may think that's a different, like a switch, but it seems like there's a lot of similarities between those things. You're talking about being in front of people. You're talking about expressing yourself. You're talking about generating a response in the audience that you're performing to in one sense or another. So there's a lot of overlap. It feels like between those two goals.
It's amazing the way that God works. It's true that God works in mysterious ways. I never understood that exact sentiment more, as I get older. I'm 45 now. I see that, yeah, there are a lot of similarities. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So when did whether it was high school or later, like what was your first, I guess I want to put a little quotes around this, but real band, like when you actually are playing and for paying audiences and things like this. Like was there another step there?
Through high school, the band that I was in, I mean, even before that in like eighth grade, but yeah, especially in high school, every now and again, my band would get involved in a show that was like kind of local. I mean, we would have to go to Newark, New Jersey. There's a place called like, Studio One, and a big band would come, and the roster would be filled with like 30 other bands underneath them. And where you wound up on the roster was how many tickets you sold. So there wasn't a lot of gigs. We would play in somebody's garage, and people would come over and listen to us and skateboard. There
Okay.
wasn't a really like a big scene. There was no clubs or anything that we ever really played at on a regular
Okay.
basis, at least.
So that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, I mean, I don't want to assume, but I'm going to go ahead and do so. And you two, please correct me if I'm wrong. But at some point you auditioned to be the front man for the Misfits, and I'm just trying to get a sense of what you were doing immediately before you went to that audition, and then let's talk about obviously that transition itself.
Yeah, so the summers of my high school years, I would come up here to New York State, to the Catskill Mountains, and I worked at a vacation resort up here. When I was going to high school, I wasn't the easiest person in the world to handle because I never wanted to go to school because I just didn't care about school because all I wanted to do was I just wanted to do music. As I got older, I took a real liking to just the operations of this place because it was very much like the production of a show at this resort, which is 10 minutes down the road from me. Where these families would come up and they'd be entertained and they have this experience. It's this whole interactive, wonderful thing. And I truly fell in love with wanting to be part of the whole production of it. So my father asked the Nicholson family, who owns the establishment, they always have since arriving here in America 100 years ago. So talked to the owners, and they gave me a job, and they took me in, like their own. And I really learned the value of hard work, and I really learned hard work. So not to get too much into the weeds, I became friends with people up here. This is where I longed to be. These were where my friends were. The owners, Gary Nicholson, would put me on stage. They helped me learn how to be with people. I got the opportunity to try songs out.
Well, let me make sure I understand. So this is a resort, and you're on stage, and you're singing, you're performing. Are you on your own? Are you with others? What's
What I
what's
was
happening?
actually doing, during the day, I worked in the kitchen. I'd be peeling potatoes. I'd wash dishes. I'm cutting grass during the days. Towards the end of the summer, I would have the opportunity to become the social director. So be I would be doing like the bingo. I would be playing kickball with the kid. I would be organizing kickball. I'd be organizing softball. I'd be doing fishing tournaments. And then at night during the week, they would have talent nights, and they would have other bands come in. And especially during talent night, that would be my opportunity. I would get up and I would play. I remember I would jam the song from Depeche Mode on the piano and sing. First time I did it was an absolute disaster, and I literally walked off the stage. So I was getting all of this experience. I was getting all of these experiences that were really building my character and making me better as a musician. Senior year, I was going to stay up here in Greenville, New York, and go to and finish out my high school year with my friends who were up here. Didn't work out during the year. My I always imagined myself after graduating high school to living up here where I am now, working at this resort, and maybe hopefully getting that opportunity that I knew that I was destined for. So during my senior year in high school, going about my business, and the end of March rolls around and I get a phone call that one of my buddies up here had a tragic accident and died.
Ooh,
We were 18 years old. He died. He drowned in the Catskill Creek, and it
jeez.
was like being hit by a Mack truck. I never I never really experienced death in my life like that. And this was my buddy. This was someone. I gave my first autograph to this kid, and he was one of the. He was like, oh, he believed in me. It was a terrible thing. So I never went back. I never went back. But like I was saying before, God works in mysterious ways, because I stayed home that summer. I got a job. I joined a band. We were working on recording and really upping our game. And while recording a demo in Lodi, New Jersey, the sound engineer's name was Bobby Aleka. The studio was called Real Platinum. It's probably still there. He turns to me as we're working on vocals. He says, "Man, you really got something. I know these guys, and I've known them all my life. They're in a band called the Misfits. They're getting back together. And they're looking for a singer." And he handed me a number and said, "Call this guy. His name is Jerry, and schedule an audition. Might work out for you." And so I did.
All right, so I have a number of questions. So let's start with first of all, were you a fan of the Misfits already? Did you know their music? Was it something that you were like, really jazzed about and knew the songs and things like that, or did you have to like research it and learn, the music and whatnot before going into audition?
I had to learn the songs. The first thing I said to Bobby was, I don't. I said to him, I said, "Bobby, I can't sing like that. I don't sing death metal." And he laughed.
Well, yeah. What kind of music were you performing before, like with the band that you were doing the demos for?
If you took like Rush and Tool and the Smashing Pumpkins and Jane's Addiction and smashed it all together, that's the kind
Okay,
of music my band was making. It was alternative. It wasn't punk music. I
right.
was a skate rat, right? So, and when I was a skate rat and we were outside, people would bring their boom boxes with their mixtapes. And sure, you always heard, when I heard Skulls and I heard Martian and I heard some of the more popular songs, uh, they were familiar to me. My age, I knew if you said Glenn Danzig to me, and if and I heard Mother, it's like, oh, okay, that's the guy on MTV.
Right, totally. So you're familiar with some of these things, but it wasn't necessarily what you were listening to or playing at the time.
No,
Okay.
nope.
All right, but you still wanted to give it a shot because
It interested me because I knew that these guys were definitely doing things that I didn't have access to yet. They were, they were a band that was already in place. That seemed that I knew.
right.
And when I called up some of my friends, they freaked out. Again, like I was younger and I had a lot of older friends. I hung out with a lot of older friends who were punk rockers and skinheads, but I was never cliquey. So I just kind of bounced, I had goth friends. I had athlete friends. I had, um, I just had a lot of diverse friends. My main group of friends were no pun intended. They were like misfit kids, right? So they
Uh-huh.
were punks and they were skinheads. And so as soon as word got to them, I called them up. I'm like, yeah, blah blah blah, Misfits. Everyone said you have to come over right now. And I remember one of my older friends who was in college. He was a huge Henry Rollins fan. Huge. She sat me down and the first thing she played for me was Henry Rollins, Get in the Van, and I listened to that. And then she gave me all her Misfit records and said, start listening. And I did, and I came out, and then the picture started to solidify for me what this might be.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense, right? And then you go in, you've heard all this stuff, you've listened to the music, you had to learn the songs. Just tell me about the audition. I guess I'm really I've always been curious about how those work.
It was really weird because the way that I envisioned it in my head was not the way it was. I showed up at a big machine shop that the Jerry Only's family owned. They were machinists, so there was this big building, and in the middle of rural New Jersey. Actually, it was in. It's built up now, but 25, 26 years ago, it was very different. So I'm like, what the heck is this, man? I walk upstairs and it's just this like side office that they've turned into a practice room, and it's lit like in school with the fluorescent lights. It just does not feel rock and roll. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like I'm hanging out with my friends. It's not, and when we rehearse, it's not like it was. There was a weight bench in the room, and it was me. It was Jerry Only and the drummer who we called Chud. And Doyle wasn't there. The guitar player wasn't there. I was very confident. I knew the songs. I was very, very, very confident. It was the night of my 20th birthday too, or the night before my 20th birthday, and we just jammed. We jammed everything that I knew. It was just the three of us, and it had to have been at least three records worth of stuff. I mean, we played for like an hour and a half.
Wow.
And yeah, and I felt confident.
Well, what do you think was the source of that confidence? Like, why were you so confident?
I
Do you
was
think?
so confident because of all of the experience in the past, all of that momentum, all the way back to even just my mother showing confidence in me and signing me up for all of these things and saying, yeah, you definitely should join chorus, or yeah, you definitely should try out for that part. All the way through all of the hard work and the hours I spent trying to sing or just spending time and having experiences, both success and failures, and the focus and the dedication to the part of the craft that needs that. And I also felt confident because I went in there with I knew who the Misfits were. I knew what they meant in the history of music. I knew all the players. I knew how the engine was built. I feel like I had a firm grasp on the spirit of the music as well, as firm as I could at that point in my life. And so I just went in there and I ripped. I was ready. I was so ready for that opportunity. Also, aside of the technical part of feeling like, yeah, I can sing these songs, yeah, I can jump around and freak out while I sing these songs. I also had a firm grasp on the spirit of the music because I had a knowledge base that I was pulling from. I knew what the Misfits meant to the scene. I knew how they operated and where they played, and I knew it all instead of just singing the songs.
Okay, that makes sense too. Like you were thinking about your audience as you were performing. You're thinking about how the I would say the message as a communications guy, but basically you were thinking about who was going to be receiving this and what they needed and what they liked about it.
Well, yeah, because the audience that was already in place, the Misfits had become legend, and so it was in the punk scene, and in the punk scene, obviously 25, 30 years ago is
Way
way
different.
different
Yeah.
than it, way different.
Right.
So yeah, like Bob Dylan said, you got to know your song well before you start singing.
That's a good line. Well, let me just a few more questions around that. First of all, in terms of getting the gig, was it close? Were you up against any competition, or was it like you went in and you jammed and done deal?
It was this long, drawn out deal, man. It was so crazy. It lasted all summer long. I always heard that Glenn might come back. I always heard that Dave Vanian from The Damned might come back. These guys just couldn't settle on anybody. So I come in there and I audition, and a couple of weeks later they decide, well, let's take out an ad in the newspaper. So they took out an ad in the newspaper in one of the major publications in New York. They took out in the Aquarian, in the East Coast Rocker, all those newspapers. Here's the Big Skull. So that news traveled all across the country, and word started to spread that Jerry was recording all of the auditions. So there was just lines of kids that started to show up. It was really ridiculous. So what happened was I continued to obviously stick around and start to form relationships with the guys in the band, especially Doyle. Doyle and I started to get closer as this was going on. Chud and I became real close. And so anytime there was anybody that was like, oh yeah, he's kind of good, I would come along because I was always around, and I would sing a couple of songs, and it would always be back to, see, you're not going to find anybody. I'm your guy. I'm your guy. Well, I guess it's too big of a gamble. Nobody knows who I am. Maybe there's somebody better. Lord have mercy. So the Halloween season is upon us. It's getting close. The Misfits have to make a choice because the Misfits have to relaunch on Halloween, or it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
The Misfits can't relaunch on May 15th. After all these years.
Right.
So they're in the midst of all of that, and the phone rings, and it's Typo Negative's manager, and he says Typo is headlining the Roseland Theater, New York City. Why don't you guys, if you want, you guys come out during the encore set and relaunch that way? Play a couple of songs and tell everybody the Misfits are back. And they say, well, we don't have a singer. And they asked Pete Steele if he would do it. So Pete says, yeah, man, no problem. I'll do it. But Pete also says, I don't know any of the songs, so you have to come teach me. So they hang up the phone, and the Misfits, they turn to me, and they say, hey, will you go teach Pete Steele the Misfits songs? I'm like, hell yeah, I'll teach Pete Steele this. I'm a huge Typo Negative fan. I love Typo Negative. Anytime Typo Negative played in New York, New Jersey, I was there. I actually rolled up on Pete Steele one time at a show that he used to hang around the merch booth sometimes at some of the local shows. And I went up to him, and I was in the band before the Misfits, and I handed him a cassette tape, and I was one of those people. I was like, "Hey man, anytime you have some free time, you want to listen to my demo, here it is." And he was very gracious. It was awesome. So I say, "Yeah, I'll teach Pete the songs." So we all get in the car, we drive to Brooklyn, New York, and we walk into the Typo Negative practice space, which is very strange. And Pete was like grinding something, and there's sparks flying everywhere. And I'm thinking, like, what in the world? This is crazy. So we start playing. It was like Halloween Horror Business. Static. I turned into a Martian the first couple of songs, and I sang them. And Pete's got the words. I can tell he's kind of briefed himself on the songs, and he starts singing. We keep going back and forth, and we're doing this for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And Pete just stops everything. And he says, "Everyone, this is nuts." He says, what are you doing? This kid is fantastic. He sings these songs better than me. He sings these songs better than anybody in this room. This is your singer. You got to let him come out and rock these songs. And of course, my heart is in my throat. Like, fucking yeah, listen to Pete Steele. So there Pete is advocating for me, and they
really
agreed.
interesting.
The Misfits agreed, and I walked out on stage with them that night.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, you're here. You are. You auditioned. You're basically lobbying for the part. You're being very patient and very gracious with the fact that they're still continuing to audition. You're getting close to the folks. You're not like someone like myself. I'd be getting like angry or bitter or like impatient or any of these things. And so not only you're not doing that beforehand, but then when they ask you to literally go in and train the guy who you want to be, you're gracious enough to do that, and through doing that, get the gig. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and like I said, Pete Steele was my hero. I loved Typo Negative. I still do. I was a huge fan, so it was just it was amazing to even just be able to be the guy to teach Pete these songs. Yeah, and then here he is. He stands up and
Let's do it, man.
Holy cow, man.
Well, I gotta imagine that, and I'm just, tell me if I'm off base here, but I gotta imagine that because you're sort of, you haven't really been established at that level already, that you're more willing to kind of roll with these punches a little bit, right? That you don't, you don't have a platform to really kind of, make an ultimatum or anything like this. You kind of have no choice but to kind of roll with it a bit, right?
Yeah, yes, for sure. And what I see in my head, I've surfed all my life, not so much now that I have all these children. But it's like riding that wave, and when you're on the wave, if there's still more, you're looking down the line, and there's still more of that swell coming. You can't ditch out yet. You just keep going, and that's what I did. I just I crouched down, and I just kept on going. Let's see where this is going to take me. Okay. Everything is an opportunity, just like the momentum I had walking into that machine shop and feeling so confident. I said, if this doesn't work out, you want to talk about momentum and experience. This is really going to bolster something in my life. This is for something.
Well, and then you played, you got the gig, and that was, and obviously history is made. But I have to ask one question, which is just replacing, becoming the lead singer of the reformed Misfits. I mean, what was that like? Replacing the front man's different than like replacing the drummer. You know what I mean? So how did you sort of fill into that role and kind of make it your own actually over time, which I think is not a lot of people can do.
I just focused on being the singer. I didn't focus on what am I going to say to anybody. I just focused on building myself and what I had to execute as that guy. I had to be healthy enough to be able to play with these guys. I have to be hungry enough. I have to be, I have to have all of my facilities. My voice has to be strong enough. I have to have a vision of where I'm going to bring this band, because I was much more, and I am much more of a, the writer of the bunch. I had much more of an artistic, vision of where to bring the band, especially because I was younger. I was 20 years old. These guys were 31, 11, 12 years older than me. And then, beyond, Jerry was even, if he was like 15 years older than me. So I was part of the generation coming up. I was 20 years old. I was still a pup.
Right.
And so I didn't focus on all of I'm in this popular band thing. I'm going to go out and party. I didn't take part in any of that. All I did was focus on getting good. If I, that's all I focused on, was how do I get better? If I didn't do something good there, how do I do it better tomorrow?
As a growing artist or songwriter, keeping royalties coming in is important for keeping the bills paid. It's also important to keep an eye on those royalty payments. A lot of people we worked with here at Royalty Exchange were having a tough time making sense of the royalties they were getting paid. So we built a free tool called Know Your Worth that automatically analyzes every royalty payment made on your music. It breaks it all down in an easy-to-understand analysis with some insights that would be impossible to find elsewhere. Plus, it connects you with the thousands of investors on Royalty Exchange and allows them to make you offers on your music. So far, musicians have raised over $1 million for new projects, new ventures, and a whole lot of other things just through the Know Your Worth app. If you're earning royalties, you should be keeping track of them, and Know Your Worth makes it easy. It only takes about 3 minutes to connect an account, and the tool will automatically update over time. Just visit worth.royaltyexchange.com or find the link in the show notes to get started. Now, let's get back to the interview.
How did you approach the idea with them about actually writing new songs? Did you come up with a song as an idea, or did everyone just get together and say, okay, it's new music time, and you just naturally flowed into that part? How did the writing component come in?
So the first tours we did were the Resurrection tours, and we just focused on all of the old material. We knew at a certain point that was going to end. We had to write new music. I knew that as well. So while we were out on the road and we were having so much success coming out of Europe, and once we started selling the American shows, we were out with Anthrax, who just had a new album, Cannibal Corpse, Life of Agony. Record companies started to look at us. And so we knew that and if we were going to be a relevant band, if we were going to be a real band, and we weren't just going to ride the wave of, there's a lot of punk bands coming back then. The Sex Pistols reunited back then. The Ramones were charging hard, getting ready actually to retire. They were on their last 5-year run. There was a lot of that going on, but we wanted to be a relevant band, so we have to write new material. The other fellas in the band, Doyle and Jerry, were coming from a band that was very, very metal. It was called Christ the Conqueror, and it had Jeff Scott Soto singing, and he's got a great voice, but it is not punk rock at all. It's not alternative. It's straight up metal. It's like big metal. Uh-huh. And I knew that we couldn't do that. And so I started to, I read a lot. I loved history. I was reading, I loved science. And so I started to write songs, man. And I was reading this book called American Psycho. And I thought, how perfect for the times, how perfect for the way that the world feels right now, to come up with a concept around that. And so I started to put together songs, and American Psycho was one of them. And we started demoing stuff, and I started showing those guys, and it became clear to them as well that, oh my God, this kid's a ringer. He's got 15 songs that we can right off the bat. Here we
Right.
go.
Well, that's great. And and there's not a lot of people that I get a chance to ask this to, so I'm always curious. You obviously you're a performer, singer, right? You're recording, things like that, but also a songwriter. Do you prefer one over the other? Are they just two completely different worlds that you jump between, like, writing versus performing?
I love them both equally for what it does to me. When I'm performing, the payoff of that is is different than the payoff of writing something. But if I'll be honest with you, if I had to choose between, no, I shouldn't do that.
You don't have to choose. I guess I'm just trying to understand what those different payoffs are that you mentioned. Like, it almost feels like when you perform, it's like you're doing something for others, whereas when you're writing, you're doing something for yourself. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I'm interpreting here.
When I'm writing, it's like going out into the forest and looking for something. You kind of know what, and you kind of know what you're looking for. This shiny sort of, and I'm using that as an allegory to the emotion or the sentiment that you're trying to capture in a song. So you're specifically looking for that emotion, that sentiment. I'm specifically looking for this grayish green rock that might be somewhere in this forest. Kind of know where it is. So you head over and it's like finding that rock. It's like, I found it. That's it. And for me, it's like I feel a shift that I've found something. I always know that I have something creatively, song wise, when it's like it hits me and I have a true emotional, it moves me. I have this emotional response to it, whether it's a phrase, and that it's usually a phrase within a melody. It could just be 3 chords over and over. You feel it deep down where that small silent voice comes from in the pit of your stomach. You're like, there it is. That's the payoff.
And then for performing, it's a different payoff.
Yeah, it's more of a triangulated thing because it's like it's coming out of me. It's being put into the physical world. It's being, it's manifested into the physical world through me and through the other guys in the band. It gets into that audience, and then knowing that those people, that audience in front of you, has connected to that signal is a fulfillment. It's the completion of a circle. And so it's almost like it's like this, it's an amplification of it all. And in many ways what's the word I'm looking for? It not that it gives substance to everything. The payoff is I don't know the adjective I'm looking for. It's not coming to my mind.
But it's definitely a different. It fulfills you in another way, and I think that's really what's important and what matters, and that you can appreciate them both. I definitely don't want to ask you to pick one over the other because I don't think that would be fair. But I'm always just curious about the two different places that people can go to when they have the unique ability to do both, and because it's not as common. Usually, I talk to folks that are either are songwriters or they are performers.
Yeah, I feel like I did it. When we're performing and everything clicks, I feel like I did it. When that circle is complete, it makes all of the hard work. Even back when I wasn't so good at it and I wasn't so successful, it I feel in my heart and my soul that I did it. I did it.
Yeah, it's definitely a point of satisfaction. I could keep on asking you a ton of questions here, but I want to be respectful of your time. Just I
Listen,
wanted to.
I'll answer as many. I have no time constraints.
That's great. Well, let me just. I don't want to get away from the Misfits too much. I think that's a great story in terms of how you kind of got into the business and whatnot. But I'm also very, very interested in how you've expanded beyond that. You've at one point you joined the Marines, for instance, which I thought was very interesting, and then getting after that, from a musical perspective, expanded into different types of music. You didn't let yourself just stick within that sort of Misfits genre, the punk genre, but got into more the folk component with the Vagabond time and as well and beyond and whatnot. So I was just wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about where you went, after the Misfits, and that maybe just why you wanted to kind of branch out in those different ways.
Well, I left the Misfits because there was nobody in that circle that cared about my future. There was nobody that was looking out for my well-being, and I could take care of myself physically. I'm talking about the business of things. Music is a business.
Oh yeah.
And there was a lot of money in, I was signed to Geffen, then I was signed to RoadRunner. There was a lot, it was a legitimate thing, but publishing and contracts and again, I was 20-year-old, I was a kid. I just wanted to play in a band. You gave me a couple $1,000 and oh my God, I'm going to spend 2 weeks surfing in between tours, or I'm a kid, and there's nobody thinking like, all right, we have to teach Michael about what, there was nobody looking out for the business end of things, and I knew that, and I struggled, and I did my best to understand things and play the game, if you will. And at the end of my run with the Misfits, as things were coming apart, I was so unhappy. Like I was miserable inside. And that didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense. I mean, my dreams had come true. Literally, my dreams had come true. We were selling out shows all over the world. Our records were doing really well. Everything was great. Everything was great. Except when you really looked inside at the band, and it was messed up, and I felt horrible, and I felt lost, and everything was just painful, and it was crazy, man. So it got to a point, I reached a real low, and I said to myself, what is this all for? Sure, I have a lot of money. There's beautiful women. I'm in Los Angeles. We're on TV. I can call up Twiggy from Marilyn Manson right now. I'm hanging out with Rob Zombie. It's like that, It's like that. It's like what you think it would be, but it's just not, And so I got to that rock and roll crossroads. I had to make a decision. Do I continue like this and ride, because there's still more of the wave.
Right.
Do I keep going, or do I ditch out and wait for something else to come along, or because this is not making me feel good? Well, or do I just get out of this and dream something else? And when I really looked at it, I ditched. I immediately turned my surfboard and I got off the wave, and I ran. And I walked away because my heart and my soul were not happy. It did not feel good to be me. It didn't feel good to be nothing felt good. And so I left. And I told those guys when I left why I was leaving, and that I would rather, and I told the fans too, I would rather go back to Dumont. I would rather go back to anywhere and have to live on the corner in a box with no money at all. And nobody knows my name. I'll never have any of this, the lights on me again, and be happy in my heart with the decisions that I make about such huge things and what I reflect back out onto the world, then stick with the status quo and what was happening to me and lie to people. And God knows I would be a very, very different person, because I think that's the road that people start to go down when you have so much pain, that you start to cover it with things, whether that's drugs or whatever that is. And life shouldn't hurt that bad. And so I left.
And where did you go?
So I literally went back to Seaside Heights, New Jersey, and started all over again, because eventually my money ran out. I still hear it from fans. It's part of my story that people say, "Did you really work at IHOP? You went back?" And I say, "Yeah, man, I really did." There was a cook in the kitchen who knew who I was. You know, he knew that I was Michale Graves. Never said anything about it. And every night that kid cooked me something and just put it in a bag. And it was like the best cheeseburger I ever ate. And he would always cook me these cheeseburgers and leave them in a bag for me to take home at night, because he knew who I was, and he knew that where I had come from. And it was hard, man. It was hard. And so, yeah, I went back to Seaside Heights, New Jersey, and I started again. I had a girl that I was in love with that eventually, it fell apart, and I had to say, what in the world am I going to, what do I do now? Right? I mean, remember, I couldn't call up the record company or management company. It was just me. It was like when you get whacked, I had no number to call. I was gone.
And so what did you do?
Well, I kept on working, and I moved out of the house that I was in, and at one point I had a conversation with my father. My father's a very different person than me. My father was a police officer all my life. Before that, he was in the military. And so my father's answer was always, join the military. Do some time in the military. Not that that was a bad thing, but that's what my family was like that. My dad's advice was, and it's something that my father and I always share. There's definitely a part of my father in me that I can't get away from. And so my dad started, he knew about that sort of life, and we started talking about it, and it seemed like a good idea to ponder. So the plan started to become, all right, well, I'll look into this. I can get experience. I can go to college. I can get a job. I can have a foundation in which to build from, because I always wanted to have a family. I always hoped to fall in love with somebody and be able to provide for them. Well, how do I do that? And so there that answer was, and life just so happens to then throw at me and the opportunity to run into somebody that I had gone to high school with, who happened to, somebody that actually my brother graduated with, and I went to school with his brother, who was a Marine Corps recruiter. And so him and I started to talk, and I started to shift my mind, thinking, all right, you know what, maybe I'll join the military. But it was tough, because I was at this point, 27 years old, 27 years old.
That's like ancient for the Marines, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. So I get back home and I start thinking about that, right? And Chud and I start a band called Graves,
Mm-hmm.
and which he kind of talks me into. And I didn't want any part of it, because, again, like, I'm still reeling from leaving the Misfits. And so we're going through this, and we start this band. We find some guys, and September 11th happens.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so New York City's on fire. The towers fall, which is, again, it's a tremendous blow to us. We live right there. I live 12 miles from the George Washington Bridge. There's smoke in the sky. And now starts the part of my life where there's just this series of really horrible things. Fast forward through September 11th, we go out on the road. It's a very difficult thing. Right before we leave, I get news that a friend of mine and his fiance were murdered. They were shot to death in Toms River by a crazed ex-police officer from Newark. It was a terrible, terrible thing. So I lost a lot of people. I had a good friend of mine that her and I connected after my mom and this individual's mom saw that we both had heartache and decided to get us together. And we had known each other all of our lives. And long story short, this individual and I made this really neat connection, and she was studying to be a marine biologist and went back to where she was studying and where she was working, and something happened, and I got a call that she had committed suicide. So it was just like this one thing after another, right? This one thing after another, and Graves breaks up, and I start this other band. Meanwhile, we're not making any money. I meet this other woman. I'm trying to get into the Marine Corps, trying to make that decision about things. The political world is just crazy. I start writing articles that ruffle the feathers of what seems to be the entire punk industry. And again, getting into the military at my age, now I'm 28 years old, now I'm 29 years old, is really rough, man. It's really rough. I have to get waivers for this and that, my age. There's guys who are 18 years old that I'm competing against as far as like physical, and it's just insane. And I have no money. I'm miserable. Lord have mercy. So, at one point I make the jump and I say, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm done. I'm done with music. I've had it. An article came out in the New York Times about my involvement and my spat, if you will, with Fat Mike from NoFX and punkvoter.com. It was this huge voter drive initiative, and I was taking the other side of some of the issues that they had, and it just became this big shit show, if you will. And all my tours got canceled, and it got to a point where nobody would interview me, and they were calling me, it was a lot like today. I was being called a racist and a Nazi and all of these terrible, terrible things. And I couldn't tour anymore. We would either get, into fights every night, or the promoters would get pressured by other people and they would cancel. And so I said, I've had it. I've had it. I just want a normal life. Mm-hmm. And so I joined the Marine Corps. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something different. I was getting much more satisfaction at that point, because as I was transitioning into the military and trying to get my billet to be able to go to boot camp, I got to meet a lot of really fine, especially young individuals, guys, men in their 20s that were coming home, from battle, and even back then, having a real hard time with things. These 20-something-year-old snipers, for example, they would come home and try to transition back into civilian life, and sometimes have a really hard time. And I was introduced to one kid in particular, and who loved my music, and so I got to sit and work with him and talk with him, and again, I was around because I was using who I was as a way to motivate these young kids who were trying to figure out their lives and really striving for excellence, and who were scared, and that were as well trying to get into the military. And so it really helped to be around a lot of that.
Did any of that help you sort of maybe reconnect to why you wanted to create music in the first place? That sense of, putting something out into the world, seeing people react, going back even to those early days of wanting to be the preacher, right? Where you have something to say, and there's people that need to hear it. And after going through the ringer with, all the other components of the music business that you outlined earlier, was having that connection with folks on a more individual level. Did that help bring you back to the idea of maybe doing music again?
Yeah, it sure did. Yeah, it sure did. Because I was being trained to be a killer. You go to the military, you're not trained to do much else, especially in the Marine Corps. You're being trained on how to kill people. And I joined as a rifleman, right? So I was going, because I was older. What I wanted to do was, lead a rifle team. But it never sat in my heart and in my soul right. There was always, even from the first time I spoke to my dad years before that, like, all right, I might do this, Pop. There was something in my heart and my soul that would always rumble. And it's hard to talk about because, the Marine Corps is part of my story, but it's almost like, people just see that in my story, and I don't like to be thought of like a real Marine, a real Army guy, because my military career was very, very short. I did not like it. I was not necessarily good at I was never good at any of that. I was good at motivating and leading people and assessing weaknesses and strengths, and utilizing those things in order to make especially a team function and execute properly, efficiently, and productively. Right? I mean, but that's where my strengths, and ultimately what got me, when I was 30 years old, I was able to join the Marine Corps. But I hated it. And at the end, as I refused to continue, I just, either throw me in jail or I want out, is what it became. And that's both, and that breaks my heart, because it breaks my heart. And I remember one of my commanders, he sat down and he said, Michael, and I was messed up. I was broken. I was lost, because what world am I going to live in now? What am I going to do? Go back to the music world? I can't. And I can't go forward. I can't exist in this military world. I don't want to kill people. And I can't, and I don't want to lead people. I can't do that. I mean, I can, but I don't want to. And my commander said to me, man, we need you to fight this war in a different way, right? We need you to fight it in a different way. And I didn't know what that meant, and it took a while for me to figure it out. It took a couple more years and some other experiences for me to figure that out. And so I got out of the Marine Corps, and I still continue to work with recruiting a little bit, and with the publicity department. And then I had to dream a different dream. I had to figure out a different way.
And what I really think that you've gotten to, I mean, looking at some of the music that you when you did go back to music that you were making was a pretty clear departure from some of the stuff that you were most well known for, and I think that's well, I mean, that's not only is it hard to do, but it's brave as well, because I mean, this is a business that likes to pigeonhole people, that likes to here's your label, and you now have to live that label, and you didn't, you refused that label and went in your own way. I mean, like I said, you know, you do folk and country a little bit. You got even some faith-based stuff, things like that. Like, I mean, that seems that's hard to do. That's not really a question; it's a statement, I guess. But
well, I appreciate that. So here I am, fresh out of the military, and I so what am I going to do? So I said, all right, here, this is what I'm going to do. I had the opportunity. My brother got me a job with him. He was leading a snowmaking team as a part-time gig, an overnight snowmaking team up in Sussex, New Jersey, working for a big ski mountain up there. So, so I start working with him, and I decide to go back to school and become an emergency medical technician, which I did, and I focused, and I was trained in heavy rescue. Like, I'm the guy that shows up and with the jaws of life, and I get you out of your car and fly you off in the helicopter type stuff. My dad was a paramedic as well, so it's just something in me. I love that. So I went to school for that, and I learned how to do that. And in through this, I pick up the acoustic guitar again, and I say, you know, I'm going to go back to the beginning of everything. I'm going to go back to like Robert Johnson, but even before where rock, you know, before rock was even born. And I started to listen to old Robert Johnson and these old blues guys that would just set up a microphone in the corner of a barn and just start playing, and just listening to that, and then working my way through listening to old blues and old country and old Christian music and the slave songs of the American South, and just really getting the soul of rock and roll, and eventually what became punk rock, because I've always loved that music. And so I started to teach myself how to play and sing in a more profound way. You know, really listen to a lot of Bob Dylan, and a lot of Bob Dylan. And I said, I'm just gonna start playing music like this. I don't need a band. I want to play like this. I want to play again like Bob Dylan.
And I think what's interesting about that is that, like Bob Dylan, you know, he refused labels himself, right? And I believe when we talked, you know, it's been earlier in the interview here, you said you were never really, I think you said you never really clicky, right? You never really sort of lumped yourself into one group or another. You kind of, you know, did your own thing, and this was a way for you to do the same thing musically, right? You weren't going to let yourself be confined, I guess would be the word, to the punk clique that you were made famous for, but, you know, create new music on your own and everything else. And so is that what you've been doing since then? Is that the kind of music that you're, I guess we could just talk about like what you're doing now. Like where are you now? What kind of music you're playing now? What are you trying to put out there today?
I'm just making the music that comes out of me. Really, I haven't really sat down and wrote anything in maybe a couple of years, but I'm poised to, and that's one of the situations that this whole virus thing has forced a lot of people into, including me. You know, I was on the cusp of a creative explosion in another way, but you know, I was writing I was working on outlines and working on books before this whole thing, and I had ideas for short films that I was working on, and videos, and that I was going to develop and work on while I was out on the road for the next 4 or 5 months. And so
and then homeschool intervened.
Yeah, right. So now my time is been has to be divided up in a different sort of way. So I'm focusing on, yeah, I have some new gear. I'm going to be writing some new songs. There's a lot of songs too that I want to cover and just kind of record and just to hear and put out there and share with everybody. Um, Man, yeah, I'm working on developing my podcast. There's actually two or three podcasts that I'm working on developing, and I'm starting to look at picking up the writing the book again at some point if I can find time. I'm doing a million. Yeah, I'm really doing a million things, but what I'm focusing on right now um, is communicating with my fans, developing new music, and and building out my rig, if you will, updating all my hardware and my software so that I can exist in this digital world at a higher level. You know, like all my
Yeah.
equipment is so. I was living in Arkansas 6 7 years ago using some of the same equipment I had. Um, so
So yeah, so a new foundation, basically.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, it's
well,
really
you know
cool.
what? I want to thank you for taking the time with us today. I think what's always interesting to me when I have these conversations is that the name of the podcast is The Big Break, and we always talk about first there's the obvious big break of how the person that I'm speaking with, yourself obviously included, goes, the big break that puts him into the music career, that sort of sets that path forward, right? There's always that big obvious break, but there's always another less obvious one that
Sure.
tends to be the more impactful one, right? And I think that your story definitely is within that theme in terms of, yeah, you had the big break when you were named the new lead singer of the Misfits, but then you had that secondary big break when you had the realization that it wasn't for you, and then you left, and that sort of set the next stage of where your career is now. Obviously, a lot of things happen since then, but like there's always that secondary break that I always find really, really interesting, and it's usually the more interesting one than just how you kind of got quote famous to begin with. So I don't know. I think it's definitely something worth thinking about for anyone listening.
For sure, Anthony. I think that I love the name of the podcast, The Big Break, but that's the point. It's not just one. You know, sure, the big break that gives you that opportunity to whatever, to sing for somebody or to have the opportunity, whatever it is. But it's almost like the lines on the screen here I see of the waves when you record something. There's the
Sure.
big break, and then there's some other little breaks here and there, and then there's another big break. Those are the opportunities, and I like to tell young artists, and musicians, and creatives that the key to it all is to keeping your eyes open, constantly putting yourself in a position to learn so that when that next big break comes along, you're ready. When that pitch comes in, you see it coming in. You can see the laces on the ball, man, so that you can hit it out of the park. That's the key, to be ready. To be ready. And how you are not ready is by being lazy, letting your mind go, letting your body go, letting your chops go, and just walking in the park every day or sitting on the couch. You got to work. You have to work hard, and you got to be ready.
Well, I think that's about as good as place as any to end that portion of it. How do people stay in touch with you? How do they find you and follow you along the way?
Best thing to do is go to officialmichaelgraves.com. Officialmichaelgraves.com. And that's where all our news and links will exist for everything that comes out of me. Officialmichaelgraves.com.
Okay. Well, I will definitely take a look myself. Michael, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I do appreciate it. Please, good luck to you and the rest of your lockdown, even though things are starting to ease up a little bit. I'm sure it's going to be a while before you're going to be on the road again. So good luck to you with all of that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you two, you take care. And thank you so much for the opportunity. And everybody that's listening, just hang in there and keep punching. Keep punching.
All right. Thanks for listening. To keep up with Michael and the projects he's working on, check out his social media profiles and his website linked in the show notes. We'll have another brand new episode in 2 weeks. Until then, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.